You ever notice how the quietest places in the world sometimes feel the most wrong? Like, imagine this with me for a second. You're sitting alone in a fire lookout tower, miles away from the nearest town, surrounded by nothing but endless forest. No cars, no people, just trees, wind, and that creaking wooden tower under your feet. Now here's the part that gets me. These lookouts were built so one person could sit up there for months, completely alone, watching for smoke. And a lot of those towers, they're in forests where strange things have been reported for decades. Footsteps where nobody should be, lights moving through trees at 2 a.m., and sometimes someone knocking on the tower door even though the ladder was pulled up hours ago. So tonight's story is about a fire lookout in a remote forest, and something that probably should never have climbed that tower. But before we get into it, I'm curious about something. Where are you watching this from right now? Tell me your country and what time it is there while you're listening to this. And if you've ever had a real creepy experience in the woods while camping, hiking, or being somewhere completely isolated, drop it in the comments. I read a lot of them, and some of your stories are honestly more terrifying than anything I've ever written. So, without any further discussion, let's begin. I don't really know where to start with this, so I'm just going to start from the part that I keep coming back to. The knocking. I think it was somewhere around 11:40, maybe later. I'd been asleep for maybe 2 hours, which wasn't unusual up there. You sleep weird in a fire tower. You wake up for nothing. Wind, a branch, your own breathing. After a while, you stop trusting your own sense of what's normal because everything feels slightly wrong at first, and then slightly normal, and then slightly wrong again. But this wasn't that. It was real. Loud enough that it pulled me out of sleep the way almost nothing does. Like the kind of knocking that has weight behind it. Deliberate, not frantic, not desperate, just insistent. Like whoever was on the other side of that door had all the time in the world. And I need to back up for a second before I get into what happened next, because there's something you need to understand about the tower itself. Otherwise, none of this makes sense. My name's Aaron Pike. I was 31 when this happened. August 2023, I'd taken a seasonal lookout position through a forestry contractor, which I know how that sounds now, but at the time it was exactly what I wanted. I'd been working admin for a landscape architecture firm in Billings for about 3 years, and I just needed to not do that anymore. Not permanently, just for a summer. My girlfriend at the time, Mara, thought it was a decent idea in theory, but she wasn't thrilled about the no-cell signal thing. We talked every week through the landline radio when the ranger checked in. That was the arrangement. The station was called Black Ridge, northern Montana, about 12 miles from the nearest ranger outpost. You get there by a fire road that's barely a road, and once a week, a guy named Prescott would drive up in a supply truck with food in a propane tank, and sometimes a paperback if you remembered. That was the extent of human contact, which, again, that was the point. I thought I wanted that. The tower itself sits on a steel frame 80 feet up. You access it by an aluminum extension ladder on the outside, which you pull up at night using a rope and pulley rig that's bolted to the underside of the platform. Standard wildfire protocol. Once you're up, you're up. The trapdoor in the floor is the only way in or out, and it latches from the inside with a sliding bolt. I want you to hold that in your mind. 80 feet. Ladder pulled up. Trapdoor bolted. That's what I was thinking about when I heard the knocking. I lay still for a few seconds first. That's what you do, right? You give yourself a moment to decide if you actually heard it or if you dreamed it. And then it happened again, and I sat up. It was coming from below the trapdoor, just directly beneath me. 3 knocks, even pace, pause, 3 more. Now here's what I want you to really sit with, because this is the part that I still can't rationalize even now. If someone had climbed the ladder and the ladder was down, which it wasn't supposed to be, but set that aside for a second. If someone had climbed an aluminum extension ladder to 80 feet in the dark, I would have heard that. The whole frame resonates. Even a squirrel on that ladder, you feel it through the floor. I felt it. It transmits up through the steel and into the wood, and you just know something's on it. I heard nothing before the knocking. No ladder. No footsteps on the platform. No creak of the trapdoor testing the bolt. Just silence. And then 3 knocks. I sat there with my flashlight in my hand, and I didn't move for probably 90 seconds. And then it stopped. Just stopped. And I went to the window and looked down. There was something at the base of the tower. I say something because I'm still not fully comfortable saying person. What I could see was a shape, standing still, at the edge of the trees, and it wasn't moving at all. I watched it for probably 3 minutes, and it did not move. No shift in weight, no head turn. It just stood there like it had been standing there for a long time and intended to stand there for a lot longer. I told myself it was a deer. I went back to my cot, and I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. Before I get into what came after, I need to tell you about the rules, because this is the thing that, when I think back now, this is where I should have understood that something was different about this post. When Prescott dropped me off that first day, he walked me through the basics: radio protocol, weather log, smoke identification, the binoculars, all of it. And at the end, he handed me a laminated sheet and said, and I'm paraphrasing, but not by much, "There's also this. Just follow them. They're there for a reason." The sheet was titled, in plain typed text, 6 Rules for Blackridge. Lookout. I don't remember all of them exactly, but the ones I do remember are the ones that ended up mattering. Rule 1 was, never leave the tower after dark. Rule 3 said, and this is the part that felt strange even then, Rule 3 said, do not respond to voices from the tree line. Which, when you read that during the day, it sounds like a wildlife warning, or maybe some old thing about radio interference. You don't sit there and go, oh, that's ominous. You go, sure, okay, makes sense, remote location, mountain lions or whatever. Rule 6 was harder to read. The lamination had a scratch across it that I thought was just damage. Later I realized someone had tried to scrape the text off from the inside, like from under the lamination, which I don't even know how you'd do that, but the text was gone. Partially gone. I could see the first couple of words, but the rest was just a pale smear. I thought about asking Prescott about it. I didn't. I figured it was just wear. Okay, so the knocking happened on my second week. Before that, the first week was fine. Boring fine. I watched for smoke. I logged lightning strikes. I made soup from the cans Prescott brought, and I read and I slept, and I radioed in my reports. Normal. Except for the 2013 thing. I didn't notice it at first, because I wasn't awake at 2:13 every night. But I started waking up, I don't know why. I'm not usually a light sleeper, and I started noticing that there was this window of time at night where the forest just stopped. Not quiet, stopped. Because there's a difference. Quiet is birds settling, wind dropping, normal nighttime hush. This was the absence of everything. No insects, no wind, no rustling, nothing. Like someone had turned off a track. It lasted maybe 4 or 5 minutes, and then it would all come back, gradually. And I'd lie there and watch the ceiling and then eventually fall back asleep. I started logging the times because I had nothing else to do. 7 nights in a row, 2:13 a.m. Every single night, same window, same silence, then back to normal. I mentioned it to Prescott on his first supply run, and he did this thing. He kind of tilted his head and said, yeah, these old forests do that, and moved on. Which isn't really an explanation. But I let it go. The motion camera was something I set up myself. The station had one, a basic trail cam, and I pointed it at the access trail below the tower, because after the knocking, I wanted to know if anything was coming close at night. And the camera started triggering. A lot. Like multiple times per night. and every time I pulled the card in the morning, there was nothing on it. Just trees. Just dark frames with the green night vision wash and nothing moving. I figured the sensor was broken. Then one morning I found the footprints. They were on the platform. My platform. Up on the walkway that runs around the outside of the cab. Muddy? Partial impressions. Like someone had been up there walking slowly around the perimeter. The ladder was inside the trap door. I pull it up every night. There is no other way up. I stood there looking at them for a long time, and I want to be clear about what I felt right then, because I think people expect me to say I was terrified. I wasn't. What I felt was more like the sensation you get when you're reading a document and you realize a sentence doesn't mean what you thought it meant. Like a slow, cold rearrangement of something. Not fear, more like the ground getting slightly softer underfoot. I cleaned the footprints off and didn't radio it in. I don't fully know why. I think I thought if I said it out loud, it would become something I had to deal with. The radio started doing things around that same time. Most nights it was just static. Not unusual. But sometimes in the middle of the static there'd be something that sounded almost like words. And I know how that sounds. Pareidolia, pattern recognition, your brain making meaning out of noise. I know that. I considered that. But the phrase that kept surfacing wasn't random noise resolving into something. It was specific, repeated. 2 words, every time. Still watching. Not loud, not clear, but there. The same 2 words, same approximate cadence. I told myself it was someone else's transmission, bleeding into the frequency. I told myself a lot of things in those weeks. After the knocking, I went back and read the rules again. All of them, more carefully. And I started looking through the old logbooks that were stacked under the desk. A lot of them were just routine entries. Smoke sightings, weather, radio check-ins, normal. But there were gaps. Lookouts who started a season and stopped logging midway through. No note about why. Just entries, 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 and then nothing. One entry, from a guy who logged under the initials RW, said, "Third night with sounds from the east side of the forest." The ranger says it's coyotes. The sounds are not coyotes. Something is learning the radio tones. And then, nothing after that for 2 weeks. Then a different handwriting. Different person. As if someone new had picked up where RW left off. I also found a reference to someone named Dalton. Gerald Dalton, I think. Ranger apparently from the 1970s. A few of the older entries mentioned him obliquely. One said he'd spent 3 nights locked in the tower with something on the platform. Another one just said, and this is a direct quote because I kept rereading it, Dalton says it watches how we do things. It copies what it sees. I sat with that for a while. There were also the fire maps. Old survey maps in a rolled plastic tube under the desk. I spread them out and compared them to the current burn zone data I'd been given. And there was an area about 2 miles northeast of the tower that showed the same rough circular burn area across 3 separate maps from different decades. Same location, same shape, like the fire kept coming back to the same spot. I circled it on my own map, and I kept the map. About 3 weeks in, Prescott stopped responding. Not immediately. His check-ins got shorter first. Then one night he radioed in and his voice sounded off, flat, like he was reading from something. And I asked him how things were at the station, and there was a pause that was too long, and he said fine, all normal, and clicked off. After that, nothing. 3 days of silence when I should have been getting daily check-ins. I wasn't panicking. I want to be honest about that. Panic would have been easier to manage. What I was doing was the opposite of panic. I was being very methodical, very calm. I was checking the radio settings twice an hour. I was keeping my log entries precise. I was eating my meals at the same times. I was constructing this very careful routine as if routine could keep everything stable. And something about that, in retrospect, is the thing I find most unsettling. Not the sounds, not the footprints. The way I was quietly losing my grip on my sense of what was real, but doing it so calmly that I almost didn't notice. Mara called the ranger station during our scheduled window and got no answer. She told me later she tried twice. She thought the line was down. I found the compartment by accident. I was moving the cot to clean under it, and there was a seam in the floorboard I hadn't noticed. A short section that didn't match the grain direction of the rest of the wood. I got a knife and worked the edge, and it came up. Under it was a small space, maybe 6 inches deep. Inside, a folded piece of paper, water damaged, and a photograph I couldn't fully make out. The paper was an earlier version of the rule sheet, not laminated, just typed on what felt like old copy paper, and it listed 7 rules. The first 6 were mostly the same as what I had, with small differences in wording, but the 7th rule was new, or not new, renewed. Someone had removed it from the version I'd been given. It said, and I'm going from memory here because I don't have the paper anymore, but I remember it clearly enough. It said something like, if something reaches the platform, do not acknowledge it. Do not look at it. Do not respond. What it learns from you, it keeps. I read that a few times, and then I sat down on the floor and I thought about Dalton locked in the tower for 3 nights, and about the entry that said it copies behavior, and about the whistling. Because I should mention the whistling. It had started maybe 4 or 5 days earlier. Faint, distant, coming from the tree line. A pattern. Short, short, long, which is also the call pattern rangers use on radio to signal a routine check-in. That specific pattern. Over and over, from different directions. Never from the same spot twice in a row. When I played back the radio transmissions in my head and compared the tones, they matched. The whistling was mimicking the radio call tones. And now that made a different kind of sense. The camera. I went back through the card from the previous night, the night I found the compartment, and I sat with the footage for a long time. There was a frame. One frame. A blurred shape on the ladder. Partway up. And here's the thing. The figure, whatever it was using the rungs, climbing them properly, hand rung, foot rung, like it had done it before, or like it had watched someone do it and was replicating the motion. The ladder was pulled up. I had pulled it up. I know I did. I log it in the book every night, but there it was on the camera, something on the ladder, climbing correctly. I zoomed in as much as the image would let me, and the proportions were, I don't want to exaggerate this. I want to be precise. The limbs looked long, not dramatically wrong, not like a monster, just long enough that it was the first thing my eye went to. The way you notice something slightly too tall or slightly too thin, and your brain does a quick recalculation before you've decided what you think. I put the camera card back and went to check the ladder. It was up. That night, and this was a few nights before I left the tower, I was lying on my cot with the light off because I'd been conserving propane. Just dark, just quiet. And then footsteps on the roof. Slow, even, moving from one side to the other like something was walking the perimeter up there. Not scrabbling, not animal fast. Deliberate, human pace, maybe slightly slower than human pace. I didn't move. I have thought about this a lot since then, why I didn't move. And I keep coming back to the 7th rule. Do not acknowledge it. I don't know if I believed it consciously in that moment, but I stayed still. The steps went around once, stopped, then silence for a long time, and then the whistling started, from 3 different directions at once. The same pattern. Short, short, long. And this time it wasn't faint. It was closer. Much closer. Like just at the edge of the platform. Then the radio turned on by itself and played back my voice, my own voice, saying a phrase I had said into the radio the day before during a routine smoke check transmission. Not garbled, not staticky, clear, my cadence, my words. Just played back to me in the dark. I put my face into the mattress and breathed slowly. The morning after, I made the decision. I know Rule 1 said don't leave after dark, but it was close enough to dawn that I could see. I had maybe 40 minutes of gray light, and the knocking had started again during the night This time from underneath the trap door, from inside the platform somehow. 3 knocks, same pattern. And I had just laid there and not moved and listened. I couldn't do another night. I got my pack together, my logbook, the old rule sheet, my water, my radio. I tied the pack to my back, and I opened the trap door and lowered the ladder, and I started down. And midway down, maybe 40 feet up, I looked out at the tree line and I counted them. 5, 6, maybe more. Standing still between the trees. No movement, just watching. The way that first shape watched on my second night, except now there were many of them. I kept climbing. When I was about 15 feet from the ground, the ladder shook. Hard, like something grabbed a rung below me and pulled. I looked down and there was nothing on the ladder, but the shaking didn't stop. It got faster, and I jumped, hit the ground, rolled, got up. My ankle felt wrong, but I ran. I ran into the forest in the direction of the fire road, and I didn't look back. Behind me, I heard the tower door open. I don't know how I know that's what I heard, but I know. The sound of the latch, the hinges. And then, nothing after that. I made it to the fire road by morning. Flagged down a maintenance vehicle around 7 a.m. The driver thought I was a hiker who'd gotten lost. I didn't correct him. I got to town. I got to a hospital for my ankle. It wasn't broken, just badly strained. And then I called Mara from a payphone because I didn't have my phone. I'd left it in the tower, and she drove 9 hours to get me. I gave a statement to the Forestry Service. I don't know what they did with it. Prescott turned up eventually. Apparently he'd been unreachable because of a radio relay issue at the station. He said there was nothing unusual in the tower logs when they went to check on it. There's one thing I've been told secondhand through a contact I made later who was doing work with the Forestry Service in that district. When the team went to retrieve the tower, the laminated rule sheet was still there, still on the wall beside the radio, and it listed 7 rules, which it didn't when I was there. It clearly listed 6 when Prescott handed it to me. 6. And the 7th rule, the one I'd found in the hidden compartment, was back, printed, laminated, like it had always been there. Except the wording was different than what I'd read in the old version. The new version said, "If the lookout leaves the tower, do not follow the voice that returns." I've tried not to think too hard about what that means. About who that instruction is for. About who they expected would read it after I was gone. I don't work for the Forestry Service anymore. I don't go into dense forest, which I know sounds like an overreaction, but it's where I've landed. Mara and I broke up in October. Not because of this, or not only because of this, but I was different after the summer, and I don't think I hid it as well as I thought I did. I stopped sleeping through the night. I'd developed this habit of checking the windows before I went to bed. Every window. In an apartment on the 4th floor of a building in Billings, Montana, where no ladder could reach, I was checking the windows. I don't do that as much now. I'm better. I think I'm better. Mara told me once, near the end, that I'd started whispering in my sleep. She said she couldn't always make out what I was saying, but once, she said, she heard me say "still watching" in my sleep. I don't know if I believe her. I don't know if I believe myself either about some of this. That's the part nobody tells you about. The part where you sit with a memory and you can't tell anymore how much of it is what happened and how much is what you filled in after the fact. What you constructed, because the gaps were too uncomfortable. What I know for certain, I was there. The footprints were there. The camera footage was there. The rule sheet, both versions, existed. The logbooks existed. Dalton existed. The forest silence at 2:13 existed. And about 3 weeks after I got back, someone reported smoke on the horizon from the Black Ridge Tower. The voice on the radio sounded exactly like mine. The rangers who heard it said they couldn't raise the lookout on any follow-up channel. Just the one initial transmission. Calm. Routine. Coordinates for the smoke sighting. Standard report format. Clean sign-off. And then, nothing. There's been no official lookout posted at Black Ridge since August 2023. As of the last time I checked, the position is still listed as vacant on the Forestry Service seasonal roster. I check it every few months, just to see. It's still vacant.
You listened till the end because somewhere this story connected with you. If you heard something, don't look back, move forward, and be silent. This channel is for those who enjoy stories that stay in their mind long after they're over. If this story gave you that feeling, support the channel by subscribing it and stay connected with me in this video.